these fake tobacco products, we would just have to toss them out with all of these orders that we got in. But they had a bit of this alternative smoking fake tobacco stuff attached to every single one of their pipes, which was just their way of trying to prove that it was only not intended for marijuana use. But they failed because they got busted anyways. So I don't think anybody got put in jail with the Barnes case, but certainly they got a big fine and they've had some problems there as well. So this is all bad news for the marijuana culture, and certainly not good for those of us who make our living either selling these products or promoting advertising for those who want to sell these products. So in Germany, they don't have these problems there in that way. So that's why I think that our German magazine ultimately will probably have more ads than our North American one. But it's taking us a while to get to that point. But we've only done 3 issues, so I'm looking forward to some positive things coming out of that. By the time we start approaching issue 50, which we are for Cannabis Culture, only just over a year away, and I kind of was thinking about that the other day. 50 issues. We're only at 42 right now, so I got a ways to go. But I was thinking about what it would be like for number 50, where we'll be at that point. That's a lot of work. But in Canada, also some other interesting things have been going on. We had 3 Cannabis Cup type events in Canada this year. We had the Toker's Bowl in May of 2002. That's what year this is. Yeah, 2002, and that was pretty good. We blew a lot of money on it, but we had a great time. We've already sold out for the Toker's Bowl number 2 next year in 2003 in May. So that'll be an even more fantastic event because it'll be sold out. So that'll be awesome. 200 people will be there and it'll be great. We had 2 other Cannabis Cup type events, the Quebec Cannabis and Hashish Cup. Actually, what am I saying? The Quebec Cannabis and Hashish Cup, yeah, that one got cancelled, but there was one in Toronto and another one in Vancouver. So there was 3 events, but the one that was really the oldest and the biggest one was the Quebec Cup. And the founder of that event got put in jail for a year, apparently, just about a week before this one was to happen this year, at the end of November. So he got put in jail for putting on the one last year, and so that was bad for him, and not very good for our culture, I suppose. But he'd been doing it for 4 or 5 years, and had 500 people coming to the same location every year, and he sold the tickets much more openly and on the spot, and handed out all the pot in a way that we're not really doing it here. So hopefully his problems won't translate into problems for us in Vancouver. In Toronto, they had something called the Calyx Festival, which I think was the second one this year, and about 200 people, I think, 100 people, something like that, come out. They go on a boat cruise and have a good time. They have a few other kind of events associated with it as well, the marijuana judging an event as well. And there's the films and some prominent speakers. Alan Young was one of them, I think, a prominent Canadian cannabis-oriented lawyer. And there was also the event in Vancouver as well, put on by the Blunt Brothers, who also own the New Amsterdam Cafe, and that was in the fall as well. And that was their event was a Cannabis Cup type event, and it wasn't that big. It was all right, it didn't really compare to the magnificent craziness of the Toker's Bowl, I have to say. But it's good to see all these events happening all the time across Canada, and even though the one got hit, I bet he'll be back again next year somehow, because Alain Berthaum, that guy, he's pretty hardcore, so I don't know if a year in jail will stop him. And I can't really believe somehow that he's going to be in jail for a whole year, but maybe he will, I don't know. But if Canadian Senate decriminalizes marijuana, or Canadian Parliament decriminalizes marijuana sometime soon, that can only help Alain's chances of getting out of jail faster. And I flew to Ottawa, Canada's capital, in the province of Ontario, and for Friday the 13th of December, we were supposed to have this big hearing before the Supreme Court of Canada, with all 9 judges in Canada's highest court prepared to rule about 3 prominent marijuana cases that have been going through the courts for 5 or 6 years, some of them. David Malm-Levine, who'd been trafficking marijuana through his harm reduction club that he was selling pot out of in Vancouver, and a fellow named Randy Kane, who got busted with a half gram of a pot, a little bit of a joint left, a roach. They're charged with possession, and he's been fighting it through the courts. Or now really his lawyer, John Conroy, one of, if not the most amazing cannabis lawyer in Canada. John Conroy, Alan Young are probably the 2 most prominent cannabis constitutional type lawyers who are really fighting in the courts to change these laws. Alan Young, I think, is probably number 1, actually. He's done a lot of cases, but Conroy is certainly up there as well. And the other big case of the 3 is Chris Clay, who was selling clones and cuttings out of his store for only a few hours, I think, in London, Ontario, back in the very early days of the magazine. And those of you who've been reading Cannabis Culture magazine back from when it was Cannabis Canada might be familiar with these cases. But these cases have been going through the courts for years and years, and now in the Supreme Court of Canada, we've been waiting all this time to hear them, and the court comes back, and the court basically says, well, we just saw on TV last night that the Minister of Justice is talking about maybe decriminalizing marijuana in Canada in a few months. So we don't want to go forward. We're not going to hear any arguments and hear any discussion on this until the spring. What was strange that the government lawyer, the lawyer who represents the Minister of Justice, or the Attorney General also is his title, wanted to go forward, and all the defense lawyers, or all the people challenging the law, wanted to go forward. It was just the court didn't want to hear it, so it's kind of odd situation where all the people on both sides want to move forward, and the court says, "No, we'll wait." And from talking to John Conroy, he said it's the first time he's ever heard that the Supreme Court of Canada has decided to hold off hearing a case under such unusual circumstances because of what they heard on the news the day before. I personally expect nothing to come out of any of the comments made in the Canadian Parliament, other than vague sort of things. I don't expect any laws to get passed in Canada in the next year. I think it will be the courts ultimately that reluctantly have to rule on this issue in Canada, because our Parliament's very cowardly. Something similar happened with the abortion laws in Canada, which I think would be great for marijuana, was that we had abortion laws in Canada which restricted abortion access, and the courts ruled that that was unconstitutional to restrict it in that way, and so Parliament just didn't do anything. They just left it. So now Canada has no law on abortion at all, really. There's some regulation of that, but there's no real sort of overarching parliamentary criminal law about it. And if that were to happen with marijuana, that'd be great, because traditionally the courts don't change the law. They normally strike things out. They don't really have the right to rewrite things. So normally they just excise parts of the law or take things out. And if they were just to strike out the whole section on marijuana from the criminal code, well, that'd be great. That'd be a great step. That'd be better than anything Parliament would do, because they would try to regulate it and control it and write restrictions. And if the courts just take it out of the criminal code, then it's just not a criminal offense. Marijuana is just like anything else, and that'd be the best. That'd be the best thing for us, really, in many ways. I'm not sure if that will happen like that. I don't know what's going to happen, obviously, but I think that by this time next year we could be celebrating some positive court decisions from the Supreme Court of Canada. So many cases are going forward. There's a lot of momentum on our side in the courts. Our arguments are worthy and right, and I think it's certainly possible, but I think that's going to be where Canadians' cannabis salvation comes from, is the courts. And of course, Canada's cannabis salvation is also the cannabis salvation of the U.S. as well, because the U.S. is going to be following Canada to legalize marijuana. They're not going to be leading us. Canada has to do it first. And there's other instances in history where Canada has been the leader over America in human rights issues, and that's not always the case. Certainly America is got instances, especially when it comes to freedom of speech, where they defeat Canada if we're having some kind of freedom contest. But certainly Canada is going to decriminalize marijuana as a country first, I think, even though American states sometimes move towards that. And we're going to see a lot of reefer refugees coming up here. We've already got very high-profile ones like Renee Bourget and Steve Cubby. Renee Bourget just had a great article in the Vancouver Sun, too, a big 2-page article with her big picture calling her the marijuana mama and stuff, and it was a pretty good article, I thought. And Steve Cubby's also had a massive media attention, and he's actually just recently been in the hospital getting some treatment for his unique adrenal cancer, which I don't really know a lot of the details, but I sure hope he survives, because Cubby's a great hero and a wonderful man. And from what I hear, he's doing really well. Now, if he gets better, that means he may not be able to grow medical marijuana for himself anymore. He'll lose his exemption in Canada, so I don't know what will come out of that. But my point of that, anyways, is rather that we're going to see a lot of these folks coming up to Canada, especially if Canada decriminalizes, where